The most dangerous person in your life right now is probably someone who told you they loved you first, not a stranger, not an enemy, someone who looked at your warmth, your ability to feel everything deeply, your instinct to heal, your refusal to give up on people, and decided quietly beneath a smile you trusted that they hated you for it, and you never saw it coming because you were too busy trying to save them. Here's what nobody tells you about being an empath: your gift is also your most precise targeting system for the wrong people. And by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly why that happens, how it's been engineered inside your nervous system since childhood, and most importantly, what the resentment of others actually reveals about the one thing they can never take from you. Stay with me, because this gets uncomfortable before it gets liberating. Before we go further, think of one person in your life who felt magnetic at first, someone you wanted to. Help to understand, to reach someone who over time began to quietly drain you, subtly undermine you, or disappear the moment you stop performing your light for them. Hold that person in your mind. Everything I'm about to say is going to explain them completely. Let's start with something most people get fundamentally wrong. When we talk about empaths, we're not talking about people who are simply nice or sensitive. We're talking about individuals whose nervous systems have been calibrated, often through early experience, to detect emotional frequency in other people with extraordinary precision. An empath walks into a room and doesn't just see faces. They read micro expressions. They feel the tension between two people who are pretending everything is fine. They notice the slight edge in someone's voice that everyone else missed. They sense the grief underneath the joke. This is not mystical. This is neurological. There is a class of neurons in the human brain mirror. Oh, neurons that fire both when we perform an action and when we observe that action in someone else. In empaths, current research suggests this mirroring system operates at a heightened sensitivity. The emotional world of other people doesn't stay outside the empath, it comes in. And here's where it gets interesting and dangerous, because that same precision that allows an empath to feel another person's pain also makes them irresistible to a very specific psychological profile, a profile that is drawn to empaths not despite their sensitivity, but because of it, a profile that senses correctly that an empath will do something most people won't. They will keep trying to understand you, even when understanding hurts them. They will keep extending grace, even when grace is being weaponized. They will keep believing in your potential, even when you've long since given up on it yourself. And for the person who secretly resents light, that's not love, that's a resource. Here's a psychological principle that will reframe everything. Unhealed people are not drawn to healed people out of admiration, they are drawn to them out of hunger. There is a phenomenon in developmental psychology known as object hunger, the desperate, often unconscious need to find in another person the emotional regulation, the validation, the sense of wholeness that was never properly formed in early life. Most people who carry deep, unprocessed shame, and I want to be precise here because this is the engine of everything, most people who carry that kind of shame do not walk around knowing they carry it. Shame, by its nature, hides itself. It disguises itself as anger, as superiority, as cynicism, as humor, as control. But underneath all of those masks, there is a child who was never seen, never genuinely validated, never taught that they were enough without performing, without winning, without taking. And then they meet you. They meet someone whose very presence communicates. I see. Oh, you, I feel you. I believe there is something worth reaching in you. And for a moment, sometimes a long moment that feels like salvation. But here is the brutal twist: the person who cannot tolerate their own darkness cannot ultimately tolerate your light either. Because your light doesn't just comfort them, it confronts them. Every time you demonstrate genuine compassion, you remind them of the compassion they are incapable of. Every time you love without condition, you hold up an involuntary mirror to their own conditional, transactional approach to human connection. And they resent you for it, not consciously in most cases. This isn't a villain twirling a mustache. This is something more tragic, a wounded person who loved the warmth of your fire, but discovered they couldn't stand next to it without seeing their own shadow on the wall. Now let's talk about your side of this equation, because understanding why they are drawn to you is only half the picture. The more important question, the one that will actually change your life, is why do you keep letting them in? The answer begins in childhood. Many empaths, not all, but a significant majority, grew up in environments where their emotional sensitivity was not a celebrated gift, it was a responsibility. Maybe you had a parent who struggled emotionally, and you learned early that your job was to read the room and adjust, to sense when the storm was coming and navigate around it, to absorb the emotional climate of your household like a sponge. Because if you could feel it clearly, maybe you could fix it. Maybe you learned that love was conditional, that affection came when you performed emotional labor, when you stayed calm, when you made others feel better about themselves, when you sacrificed your own emotional reality to manage theirs. This is what trauma therapists call the parentified child. And it creates a neurological template, a blueprint that your brain carries into every subsequent relationship. The template sounds like this: I am most valuable when I am needed. I earn connection by solving emotional pain. If someone is suffering, my purpose is to help them. Leaving would mean I failed. Do you hear what that template does? It turns your empathy, which is a gift, into a compulsion. It means you don't just choose to help people who are struggling, you are wired to be pulled toward them. Your nervous system recognizes emotional need in another person the way a compass recognizes magnetic north. It doesn't ask whether this person deserves your energy. It doesn't ask whether this person is capable of reciprocity. It just orients, it just moves toward. And the people who resent your light, they are often among the most emotionally needy people you will ever encounter, which means your compass points directly at them every single time. Let me give you something practical here, because one of the greatest challenges for empaths is that they are excellent at detecting overt emotion and terrible at detecting covert hostility, precisely because their default assumption is benevolence. You look for the wound underneath the behavior, which is compassionate, and which also makes you slow to recognize when the wound has become a weapon. So, let me describe the 7 behavioral signatures of someone who has begun to secretly resent your light. 1, the subtle diminishment. This person doesn't attack your strengths directly, they reframe them. Your empathy becomes you're too sensitive. Your boundaries become you're being dramatic. Your accomplishments get slightly minimized. A well, but always follows a compliment. They are sanding down your edges, not because they want you smoother, but because they want you smaller. 2, the exhaustion maneuver. They bring you their heaviest problems consistently, but they never implement your support. The crisis is always ongoing. The same patterns repeat without movement. You realize eventually that you're not being confided in, you're being used as a container. They drain into you and walk away lighter while you carry what they left. 3, sabotage by timing. Watch when the chaos happens. If you notice that disruptions, arguments, or emotional crises tend to occur precisely when you are beginning to thrive, a new opportunity, a moment of genuine happiness, a period of personal growth, that timing is rarely accidental. People who resent your light, often unconsciously, sometimes consciously, create turbulence when your light burns brightest. 4, the comparative undermining. They speak well of you to others, but find ways to introduce competitors, comparisons, or doubts in private. Your friend Sarah does something similar, doesn't she? Or they tell you stories about people who started where you are and failed. They plant seeds of inadequacy with the casual precision of someone who has thought about this more than they're admitting. 5, the intimacy withdrawal. After moments of genuine connection, moments where you were truly seen, they pull back, they become cold, sarcastic, or unavailable. This is the moment your light got too close. The warmth threatened to reveal something they weren't ready to face, and retreat was instinctive. 6, the martyr inversion. They begin to position themselves as the real victim in the dynamic. They are the ones who give more, sacrifice more, endure more. Your needs become evidence of your selfishness. Your pain becomes an imposition. This inversion is particularly destabilizing for empaths who are already wired to question whether they deserve space. Seven, the loyalty test. They introduce situations that force you to choose between your values and their approval, between your well being and their comfort. And when you choose yourself even once, they treat it as a betrayal of monumental proportions. Because in their internal world, your light was only acceptable as long as it was directed exclusively at them. If this is describing a relationship you're currently in, pause this right now. Write down the name. Write down which of those seven patterns you just recognized, because awareness written down becomes a decision, and a decision becomes a door. Drop a quote in the comments if you just name someone. You are not alone in this. Here's something I want you to sit with, because it is one of the most psychologically sophisticated forms of pain a human being can experience. When the person who resented your light eventually leaves, or when you finally leave, the grief is not clean. It's not the grief of losing something beautiful that ran its natural course. It's the grief of losing something you believed in that was never quite real. It's the grief of having loved someone's potential more than their presence, of having extended endless grace to someone who had quietly decided to take without reciprocating. And mixed into that grief is something even more disorienting: self blame, because the empath doesn't just mourn the relationship, the empath interrogates themselves. What did I miss? Where did I fail? What could I have done differently? Was it my fault for seeing too much in them? Was it my fault for not seeing enough? This self interrogation isn't weakness. It comes from the same place as the gift, the same profound belief in human complexity and potential that made you pour your light into this person also makes you believe irrationally, painfully, that the failure must somehow be yours. It isn't. Let me be direct with you. When someone resents your light, they are not reacting to a flaw in you. They are reacting to a truth in themselves that they are not ready to face. Your warmth, your depth, your capacity for genuine connection, these things didn't cause the resentment. They revealed it. They acted as a diagnostic, exposing something that was already there, already calcified, already defended. You did not create their wound. You simply walked close enough that its edges showed. Let's go deeper into the psychological mechanism, because understanding why your light provokes resentment in certain people is profoundly protective knowledge. There is a concept in psychological literature called cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort experience when holding two contradictory beliefs simultaneously. And when someone with deep unresolved shame encounters an authentic empath, they are thrown into a specific and brutal form of cognitive dissonance. On one hand, they are drawn to your capacity for warmth. They want it, they lean into it. They may even tell you that you are the best person they've ever known. On the other hand, your existence, your authentic, unbought, unperformed emotional availability represents everything they have convinced themselves is either impossible or unnecessary. Every wall they've built, every piece of themselves they've amputated to survive, every emotional shortcut they've taken. You, simply by being yourself, are evidence that another way is possible. And that evidence is intolerable to someone who has built their entire identity around the necessity of their defenses. Because if you can be genuine without being destroyed, then they chose their armor unnecessarily. And if they chose their armor unnecessarily, if they didn't have to become what they became, then who are they? And what was all the damage for? Rather than face that question, which would require a reckoning with grief and responsibility they are not equipped to hold, they do something simpler. They attack the evidence. They attack you subtly, slowly, with plausible deniability built into every move, so that even you, with all your emotional intelligence, second guess what you're perceiving. Here is the mechanism that makes this pattern so specifically devastating for empaths, and so easy to miss. Your compassion doesn't just make you caring, it makes you interpretively generous. When someone behaves badly toward, oh, you don't immediately assign malice. You ask, what are they going through? What wound is speaking here? What are they afraid of? How can I respond to the pain underneath the behavior? This is beautiful. This is what the world needs more of. And in this specific dynamic, it is used against you with surgical precision. Because the person who resents your light has consciously or not learned that your compassion functions as a reset button. They can undermine you, exhaust you, diminish you, and when the consequences arrive, they can reveal the wound just deeply enough, just vulnerably enough to reactivate your care. And the cycle restarts. This is not always a calculated manipulation. In many cases, it is simply a pattern that has worked that the wounded person discovered, sometimes in childhood, as a way of maintaining connection without doing the genuine work of emotional transformation. Show enough vulnerability to be forgiven, show enough need to be held, but never go. Deep enough to actually change. And the empath whose compass is calibrated to emotional need responds every time, not because they are foolish, because they are wired to respond, because responding to emotional need is the language in which they learn to be loved. Understanding this is not about judgment. It is not about deciding that the wounded person is evil or that you were naive. It is about recognizing a pattern with enough clarity to interrupt it, to bring conscious choice into a space that has been governed until now by unconscious reflex. What the resentment is actually telling you now, I want to shift the frame entirely. Because while we've been talking about resentment as something directed at you, I want you to consider what it actually reveals. The resentment of someone who cannot stand your light is, in its deepest form, an involuntary testimony to the value of what you carry. You cannot resent something that has no power. You cannot feel diminished by something. Oh, that doesn't represent something you want or need or secretly believe is possible. When someone resents your capacity for love, it means they know somewhere beneath all the defenses, beneath the sarcasm and the withdrawal and the subtle undermining, they know that love like yours is real. And they know they are not currently capable of accessing it within themselves. Your light doesn't create resentment in people who have done their work. It creates gratitude, it creates resonance, it creates the quiet relief of being fully seen and not judged for it. The resentment is a diagnosis of their wound, not a verdict on your worth. And here is perhaps the most important thing I will say in this entire conversation. The fact that broken people are drawn to you does not mean you are broken. It means you are bright. And brightness has always attracted both those who want to be illuminated and those who, unable to tolerate the contrast, would rather extinguish the source. Your job is not to. Oh, stop shining. Your job is to get extraordinarily precise about who gets to stand close to your fire. The recalibration, what healthy looks like. So, how do you change this pattern? Not by becoming less empathic, that would be like asking a river to stop flowing, but by doing something empaths are rarely taught to do. Feel the pull, then pause before you move toward it. When you sense someone's need and feel that familiar orientation, that compass swing, that impulse to reach, learn to treat that impulse as information rather than instruction. The need you're sensing is real. Your ability to feel it is real. But the question is not, can I help this person? The question is, does this person have the capacity, not just the desire, but the genuine developmental capacity to receive what I offer and participate in mutual growth? That question requires time to answer. And the people who most urgently want your attention are usually the ones who most resist giving you the time to answer. Oh, it learn the difference between vulnerability and performance of vulnerability. Genuine vulnerability leads somewhere. It moves, it metabolizes. A person who is truly vulnerable with you will, over time, change, not linearly, not without setbacks, but directionally. They will show you through behavior across time that your presence is contributing to something real in them. Performance of vulnerability loops. The same revelations, the same wounds displayed at the same moments, the same crises with slightly different costumes. The performance serves a function. It keeps you engaged, keeps you invested, keeps the dynamic alive, but it produces no genuine transformation. Watch for movement. Growth is always the proof. Practice the radical act of receiving. This is the one that most empaths intellectually understand but viscerally resist. You are extraordinarily practiced at giving. You know how to extend care, hold space, absorb pain, believe in potential. What most empaths have almost no practice with is receiving those things. And here's why that matters: the people who resent your light almost never give back. The relationship is structured around the flow of energy moving in one direction from you toward them. And you have normalized that structure because it mirrors your earliest template of what love looks like. The people who are actually right for you, the ones whose light complements yours rather than consuming it, will insist on reciprocity. They will notice when you're struggling and move toward you. They will ask what you need. They will celebrate your wholeness, not just require your care. Learning to let those people fully in, learning to receive without shrinking, without deflecting, without immediately turning the focus back to them is perhaps the deepest work an empath can do. The final truth: you are not too much. I want to close with something that I need you to carry out of this room, out of this moment, and into every relationship. You evaluate from this point forward. You have likely been told directly or indirectly that you are too much, too sensitive, too intense, too idealistic about what love can be, too unwilling to harden yourself, too hopeful. Those messages came from people who encountered your light and found it inconvenient. They came from people whose own emotional world was limited enough that your depth felt like an accusation rather than an invitation. They were not accurate assessments of your character, they were accurate assessments of their capacity. The world has a long history of describing its most sensitive, most attuned, most emotionally courageous people as problems to be managed, as people who need to be toughened, grounded, brought down to size. And in service of that project, generations of empaths have spent decades quietly betraying themselves, learning to doubt their perceptions, minimize their needs, and keep pouring into vessels that were never designed to hold or return what they received. That ends when you decide it ends, not with anger, not with a wall, with discernment. Discernment is not cynicism. Cynicism says no one can be trusted, no connection is safe. Love is always a transaction. That is the wound talking in you or in someone else. Discernment says, I know what genuine warmth feels like, and I know what hunger disguised as warmth feels like, and I am no longer willing to pretend I can't tell the difference. Discernment is empathy applied to yourself. It is using that same extraordinary capacity for perception, the one you have spent your whole life directing outward, and turning it with equal compassion and equal unflinching honesty inward and forward. It is asking, does this person's presence in my life make me more myself or less? Does being with them expand my capacity for joy and authentic connection? Or do I leave our interactions smaller, foggier, less certain of my own reality? Does this person celebrate my light, or do they only want it when it's pointed entirely at them? The last image there is a phenomenon in the natural world that I want to leave you with. Deep sea fish that live in total darkness, creatures that have spent their entire evolutionary history in lightless water, do one of two things when they encounter a luminous creature. Some are drawn to that light because it means food, because it means navigation, because it means something has become possible in the darkness that wasn't possible before. And some, the predators, are drawn to it because the light makes the source visible. The light itself is neutral, the light itself is beautiful. What matters is knowing the difference between who comes toward you in wonder and who comes toward you in hunger. You have always had the light. Now it's time to have the wisdom. You are not too much. You never were. The people who needed you smaller were simply too small for you.